Yeah, let's kind of start there then. So like background, right?
Yeah.
And for everyone that doesn't know, this is literally my best friend in the whole world. So it is really nice to have you here. It's really cool.
Thank you.
We did get to train together. We got to walk in. We used the ARC device. Actually, let's start there. Before we get to you, how'd you like the ARC? What was your experience with it?
I love the ARC device, and I feel like we started it on a little bit more intensity, probably less intensity than you thought I needed, but had on my low back, and I've had several years of low back issues, and it was a little bit too much at the beginning. But by the end of it, I did feel I felt much better, and I was a little bit concerned at first, and just because of how I was feeling, but it was a great session.
So maybe intensity level like 50%.
Yeah.
And then staying more at that faster, lower level, that might be better.
Yeah.
Because I usually, like most people, you start with like 80%. You slowly get up that depth of fuel penetration. But yeah, like when we were at that low, it's like, okay, there's some damage there. So maybe you start off a little bit lower.
Yeah. And typically, as you know me well, typically these things, I don't feel a lot of these things that other people feel, but that today I felt. Yeah, for sure.
So cool stuff on the ARC. We'll do more later on. Let's dig into Aaron Wellman, who obviously this is who Aaron Wellman is. The background, again, I know roughly just because we talk so much, but when did all of it, I don't know your actual origin story. Like, did you always like the whole strength, conditioning, fitness field, or?
Yeah, I think I started off, I think my story's not dissimilar to a lot of people in that as a kid, as an athlete, I played a lot of different sports. I had a passion for football, particularly, but was undersized. And knew that I needed to gain strength, I needed to gain speed, I needed to gain power, and I needed to gain size, most importantly. And as a 13, 14-year-old, the information that we have available now wasn't there. So the information we got was from Muscle Fitness magazine, later Muscle Media 2000 magazine, right? And so I was doing the 6-day, 2-time-a-day workout split. That Arnold Schwarzenegger had in the Arnold Schwarzenegger Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding. And so that's kind of how I got my start, but always loved the ability to kind of control your own destiny to some degree with look, I can determine how strong I get to a large degree, how big I get, my nutrition, my recovery, and just learning. That was always fascinating to me, that part of it. I loved the sport, but I also loved the preparation and the training that went into the sport.
Yeah. Which is fun because that's how it was for me. It was lacrosse, it was boxing, things like that. And it was always the train to get there.
Yeah.
It was the fun part, the nutrition to get there. Like the competition, It was cool, but like it wasn't like my end result. It was always the training. Right. So it is funny because most of us do kind of start there.
Yeah.
It kind of starts in the bodybuilding world, right?
That's right.
So did you, like how did that, because I know you never competed, but like you've basically faux competed every year for like 2 decades.
It's right. It's again, it's just something that's always been being able to change your body. And really, you look at these elite guys, and I don't have the genetics to be one of those guys, but I have the work ethic and the ability to, what I tell my wife is, I was kind of made to suffer. I have the ability to suffer and to be disciplined and to do those hard things that allow you to achieve a certain look, whether that's muscular size, or for me, it's achieving low body fat, as low as I can get. And so that was always fascinating to me. For whatever reason, I always, picking up the Muscle Fitness magazine and being a subscriber to that as a teenager, when that magazine came in the mail, that was a great day for me, And so I've always kind of been admired the fact that you can build a physique like that, and largely dependent upon your work ethic, your discipline, your motivation. And so those are all the things that resonated with me with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So then as that transitioned, the college years, right? So the field of study, obviously that's like the world you want to get into. What was that like?
Yeah, so I went and played college football at a small university in Indiana, Manchester University, Division III school. Division III football is for those who love the game and aren't quite as talented. Right, so I was surrounded by those type of guys who loved the game, who worked really hard, didn't have the talent to play at Division I level, but again took that love of training to college and really loved. I just loved every aspect of it. I loved the training. I loved early mornings. I loved late night training. I loved the game of football. Yeah. But equally, you have some people who love the training, not necessarily the game. You have some people who just love the game and just can't stomach the training that goes along with it. Yeah. I loved both. But I knew when I was done playing, I would take that training with me. I knew I'd never stop training. It was just, what am I going to train for? And at that particular time it was football, but beyond that, it was training for the love of training and to see how much I could change my body. And so college for me was an undergraduate degree in kinesiology, exercise science. And again, that was, I loved every part of it. I loved the training. I loved the study of it. I loved learning. I still do to this day. I just love that it kind of fuels my fire to learn. And so just enjoyed my whole college experience, particularly with that major and surrounding myself with similar-minded people who were on the same path.
And then
so I leave undergraduate, I get a degree in exercise science, and I get into graduate school.
Wow.
Indiana University, and knew I wanted to be in the performance realm. I played around with the thought of being a physical therapist, athletic trainer, but I really wanted to dig in and be kind of boots on the ground, so to speak, as a performance coach. And so I went and got a master's degree in exercise science, kinesiology, and I was also a graduate assistant helping with the strength conditioning program at Indiana University with the football team. And I had some collateral duties with softball and baseball and some basketball duties. But my main focus was with football and then graduate school, getting a master's degree. Was fortunate enough to finish that degree in about 1.5 years. And at that time, Indiana was hiring a full-time position. So I was a graduate assistant, which is a part-time position. You're kind of making your way through school. You're going to class. You're in class till 11 o'clock at night. You're in the weight room at 5 o'clock in the morning. That was kind of my life. And they were hiring
same life now, basically.
It is. It's largely the same. But they were hiring a full-time assistant position, and was just fortunate enough that I'd done a good enough job as a graduate assistant to fall into that role and I accepted that role. That was in May of 1998. And at the time, I've always been one who I've always looked at what's next in performance, what else can I achieve? And so I had a master's degree, and I thought, you know what, Indiana's going to pay for 6 credit hours a semester. I may as well begin another master's degree. So I started a master's degree in nutrition science. And that was kind of a long, winding road because I'd left Indiana and gone to some other schools, but eventually finished that degree. And so I was at Indiana all in all about 5 years. Okay. Graduate assistant strength coach. And coaching is a unique profession where, to get to quote unquote the top, and everyone's view of the top is different. And my view of the top is probably different now than it was 20 years ago. But you gotta, there's some moves that take place along the way. And so I left there, I went to Michigan State University, was there 3 years. And I left there at Michigan State University in January 2024 and got my first head strength and conditioning job. All the while, I haven't finished this master's degree in nutrition. This is still kind of hanging there. And became the head strength coach at Ball State University, my first head strength job in January of 2004. And really, it's one of those things where you've built up a lot of knowledge and you think you're ready, but you're not really ready till you get into the role. Yeah. And so 6 months into the role, I learned more than I learned in the 6 years prior to that. And so we were fortunate enough to have a lot of success at Ball State University, and left there January of 2009, went to San Diego State University. I was the head strength coach at San Diego State. Now completely, I've grown up in the Midwest, worked in the Midwest, moved to the West Coast. That is where I finished the master's in nutrition. Okay. So we're talking, about almost a 10-year process. But several moves involved, and was the head strength coach at San Diego State for 2 years with the football team. Again, we're fortunate to have success there. And in January 2011, went to University of Michigan. We were there through 2014 season, so there 4 years. And right at the end of 2014, again, I'm always trying to look at what else can we achieve, what's next, how do I improve my learning, how to improve my information. I always thought, as a coach, if I limit my knowledge, then I really limit my ability as a coach. Mm-hmm. And when I limit my ability, I limit the development of my athletes. And so I'm always looking for what's next. And so I began a PhD in May.
Because why not?
Yeah.
Couple masters,
and
working 20 hours a day.
You look at what else is there to achieve in the academic realm, and I hadn't achieved a PhD yet. So that's still sitting there. Yeah. That bothered me. Plus, I just had this yearning for knowledge and a thirst for knowledge. And so May of 2014, I began a PhD. 2014 season didn't go as planned at Michigan, and we were let go. 2015, I was the assistant head strength coach at University of Notre Dame. I was there 1 year. All the while now, I'd begun a PhD. Now, once again, I've begun a degree, and now life's thrown some curveballs, right? So, worked on the PhD at Notre Dame. At the end of the 2015 season, I got a call, asked if I want to be the head strength coach at the New York Giants. And that to me is the best organization of all the sports. It's not a job that you turn down. And so certainly I jumped at that opportunity. And so now I have made another move, and we're still working on the PhD. So I became the head strength coach of the New York Giants in 2016. Finished the PhD in June of 2018. And that was a PhD through the School of Medicine and Sports Science at Bond University in Australia. Okay. And really looking at, we were the first ones to kind of quantify via GPS measures, training loads, practice loads, and game loads of college football, American football. And so first one to publish papers on that. We're still proud of that. And looking at not only the loads associated with practicing games, but the subjective wellness associated with those loads. You know, what sprint distance results in soreness 48 hours post soreness and things like that. So we evaluate all that. It was great. And it's one of those where I spent 4 years. It was a PhD by publication. So 5 papers came out of that, but it's one of those where at the end of the PhD, you realize there's even less you know. You know, and I think that's part of life, right? Where we surround ourselves with people that hopefully are smarter than us. We continue to learn, and really it helps you discover that there's more stones that have been unturned, right? That we need to unturn these stones and learn more. So proud of the PhD, but again, you come out of there thinking, okay, there's a lot I don't know and still have to learn. In 2020, March of 2020, I had an opportunity to go to Indiana University, and as a director of performance. And my kids our kids were at a point where they had moved a lot, and we wanted to give kind of a stable place to finish high school. And so we went to Indiana University, and we're there 4 years. And then we're fortunate enough to come back in January of 2024, back to the NFL, and been back in the NFL for 3 years. And that's kind of the summary of the last 20 years of life here. So
I'm glad I got the full story now. I know the timeline. I think it'd be cool to go back. So whenever you first got that head coaching position, you said a lot of learning lessons, right? Because it's like education's awesome, schooling's awesome, books, research, awesome. Right. Then you apply it and you're like, that doesn't hold up all the time.
That's right.
So that first transition, right? Becoming a head strength conditioning coach, for everyone out there that is, because I know a ton of strength conditioning coaches will watch this, who already know you, already follow you from all the big places, like everyone knows your name in the S&C world. Assume one of them is just starting off year one. What are like the normal common things like that you saw that were like a big, like, oh wow, like that didn't live up at all to what the paper said?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the landscape of strength conditioning has changed in the last 22 years. However,
back then and now.
Right, between then and now. I think theory, you mentioned theory and application are two divergent processes here, right? Like, it's easy to write programs for people, right? It's easy to write a nutrition program or a training program for people. We can learn that in textbooks, and we can learn that through practical and applied experience of our own lives. But when you're applying those same principles to 100 different athletes, certainly in the NFL, different age ranges, but in college, 18 to 22-year-olds, and there's a large difference physiologically and mentally and emotionally between a lot of 18, 20-year-olds, 22-year-olds as well. But you mentioned the theory doesn't always hold up to application. And you realize real quickly that when dealing with people, we're dealing with people are creatures of emotion, not necessarily creatures of logic. And so when you got 100 different individuals, the training program, while on paper what appeared to be ideal, is far less. And so I remember writing up the first program, and within about 3 days, spending the night in the weight room that night and revamping everyone's program, because it just didn't hold up. How we picture, as a younger coach, I pictured these athletes as highly motivated, and many of them are. Highly disciplined, many of them are. people who take training seriously, who take their recovery seriously, who take their nutrition seriously. And sometimes, and you go from this utopia of training and recovery and nutrition to, hey, look, just don't eat donuts for breakfast. Let's switch from donuts to bagels. Yeah. So meeting, I think there was a really quick realization that you need to meet these athletes where they are. Mm-hmm. And where they are isn't always where we think, it's not where we want them. We'll meet them where they are. We have to take them to the next level. But oftentimes we think that they are already at these higher levels, and they're not. And so giving them space, meeting them where they are, and giving them space to improve. I think those are the big things. Just the soft skills, the people skills, the leadership skills, mm-hmm. knowing that not every athlete's going to come in the room motivated. No. Not every athlete's had the discipline or the structure that I have. I love to train. That's why I became a strength coach. They love to play their sport. They don't always love to train. Yeah. Right. And so I was highly structured as a young kid. These players and athletes aren't always many of them are, and certainly the successful ones learn structure, mm-hmm. but they don't start off that. And that's one of the beautiful things I think about not only a high school strength coach, but in college is that you get these athletes where they're a little more moldable. Yeah. And you can make a big difference in their lives. And so that's always one thing and I didn't start like that. My first entry into strength conditioning, I was single track mind. I want to win football games. That's it. At all costs win. Yeah. And it wasn't until probably 8 to 10 years in where I really had to question myself, why do I do what we do? Or why do I do what I do? And the answer ultimately for me was to physically and mentally develop young men at that point that I was working with. Yeah. Not just physically, mm-hmm. but how can I be there for them emotionally? How can I support them? How can I lead them? How can I set an example for them? How can I get the athlete that's on the wrong track on the right track? So those quickly became those aspects of it that you don't really think of, or at least that I was too immature at that time in my career to think of. Those are critical aspects. Yeah, you're almost so, as much as you love the journey, you're so end results driven that you forget about those little things, and right. you assume, hey, they're college athletes or they're in the NFL, NHL, NBA, they're going to be like me, and every meal is going to be structured. I'm going to have my right. sleep, and like you said, that's not reality. Right. Not at all. Meeting that athlete halfway, and I think that might be something for all the S&C coaches out there. Any coaches work with a pro athlete. If you think you're going to have someone come to you and everything's going to be ticked off, not going to happen. Right. They're still humans. And so like you say, it's meeting them halfway. I know for me, an easy one, right, is usually the marijuana intake. It's usually, let's cut down on that. Or the alcohol intake, let's cut down on that. Right. Or like you said, instead of the donut, let's have the bagel. And that's slowly teaching those better and better habits. And you said it perfectly, in college, they're more malleable because they haven't had all that success. Right. Because if they have the success then get to the pros and they're in the NFL, right. it's like, why should I change? Yeah, right? That's what worked the whole time. Yeah. They can be the best in the world, and yet there's still so much low-hanging fruit. Right. And that's where I kind of want to take this podcast. The low-hanging fruit that really isn't low-hanging fruit. It should be the basics everyone's doing. But I think especially in like that football-based world, there's just a lot that's not done. Right. So beyond that, right? Let's say beyond understanding that humans are humans, got to meet these players halfway, not always going to do the best, being the motivator, being almost like the dad figure for these guys. What are some of the common, we'll say, strength patterns or weakness, or like in terms of like an actual performance aspect? What did you see a lot of back in the day compared to now? Comparing it from like college guys coming in and compared to the NFL. And obviously there's all these different variabilities, but what are like the two big things? Is it always like a weak hamstring? Is it always like something? Yeah, it's not always. I think the two biggest things are the fundamental movement patterns. Mm-hmm. While athletes, I think, are very sport specific at this point, and some athletes train the same sport year round, the fundamental movement patterns are not always trained. And when I say fundamental, I mean these fundamental rudimentary movement patterns of a squat pattern, of a hinge pattern, of a lunge pattern. These fundamental basic movements we're not just talking about athletes now, we're talking about the CEOs and adults that lose. We were just watching, we were talking about your son, Apollo, and how a 2-year-old, the squat pattern is
Perfect.
is refined and perfect, and it's just natural. And we lose these patterns over time by various mechanisms. We lose them. So those fundamental movement patterns, a lot of athletes don't come in, and they're a high-level athlete. And there's professional athletes that still don't have these patterns and need to restore these patterns. So that's one thing. Secondly, I think now more than ever is the lack of general conditioning, aerobic capacity. So what used to be the athlete who played football in the fall and basketball in the winter and baseball and then summer league basketball, then back into football, who had this huge engine for aerobic capacity, now plays their sport, then they rest, and then they train for their sport, and then they play their sport. And so they haven't developed these, not only aerobic capacity, but I think these general movement skills that are transferable across multiple sports, that help in multiple sports. So the basketball player who also plays soccer, okay, who understands not only builds the physical fitness, but pattern recognition of 5-on-5 in basketball, and then a larger group in soccer. The football player who also plays basketball, or the football player who also wrestles, and just builds this whole bank of aerobic capacity, kinesthetic awareness, and pattern recognition. Boy, that's left us.
You know what's funny? Sorry to interrupt, that is the same thing for the longevity community. Like, it's kind of everyone.
Yeah.
Where to me, being multidimensional helps so much, because there's no more rate limiting factors. And then there's nothing holding you back energetically. No organs are failing. There's no bum knee that pops out. There's no torn muscles, because you're balanced, right?
Right. It's the bodybuilder that all he does is bodybuild. Well, if he'll work some ATP-PC system via, and I hate to say CrossFit or high rocks type training, but just high intensity med ball work and bike work and ropes. Yeah. Now you have more capacity, as you mentioned, to bodybuild. Right. And so but it's the same thing. So even professional athletes, I mean, there's just not enough free play and to build that year-round aerobic capacity. And I really believe that without that base of just general physical fitness, that the injury epidemic is at an all-time high, and certainly hasn't been reduced, but it's largely because of that, just that general movement ability. Getting away from the basic movement patterns of specifically related to your sport, and engaging in sports that put you through multiple patterns, where you've got to learn these new patterns of movement, multiplanar, single leg, double leg, different energy systems. I mean, that's, I don't think that can be understated, how important that is.
Do you think it's because, I think, at least from my perspective, every parent I know right now, oldest is Lila, she's 6, everyone thinks their kid's going to be the next NBA, NFL star. So they're only focused on that to get better. And then I think as you get to the college level or the professional level, if that's the job, then it's like, oh, I have to get better at my job.
Right.
And it's only focused on that. Like, that's what I always thought it was. Did you kind of see it that way?
Like,
I
agree.
Just got too big?
Yeah, I don't like the state of youth sport.
Yeah.
It's one of the, I tell my wife, if I could wave a wand and change things in the world, youth sport would be one of them. Yeah. Because like you said, a lot of parents have a misrepresentation of how talented their child is. It's hard to be subjective.
Yep.
Right? You love your kids, and we not only love them, we want what's best for them. And so even if we don't believe that they're going to be the next Michael Jordan, we still want them to have their best opportunity to make the team, to be successful, to experience success. And so what do? We put them in travel baseball, and then there's fall baseball, and there's spring baseball, and there's summer league. And so without playing that sport, they don't have an opportunity to get better because everyone else is.
Yeah.
And the coach is pressuring them. Where most, and I think those athletes who do that, the young people who do that, experience success younger, but I don't think they experience that same success in college, because now, again, we don't have all those movement variability to draw from for our sport. And so while they may be ahead of the class as a 12-year-old, I feel like those same kids get behind as they progress, if they're going to be a college athlete or professional athlete, now that they're at a performance decrement because of that. So, yeah, I think it's a problem in youth sport.
And it also causes the mental burnout. Neurologically, these kids get fried. They don't even make it to college anymore.
No.
It's like junior, senior year, they're like, I'm done. Like, I blew my wad for 12 years. It was fun, but I want to just be a normal person.
Yeah.
I think, like you said, I like starting like our kids young, but we're making it fun. Like, we're not doing anything travel. It's 2 times per week. So it's gymnastics one week or one night, and then karate the other morning, right? Because to me, activity should be fun. And if they want to push that sport harder, then cool, we can do that. But it should always be multi-dimensional. So they're still getting the walks outside. We're doing our sprints. Like, they'll do some hypertrophy work. Like, I think the blending should be there. Yeah. And I think as you kind of graduate up to maybe the professional level, right? When you're in season, that's kind of the only thing that matters. You're kind of just not get injured. You're trying to drive more recovery. Like, that makes sense to me. So maybe it's like 80-20, where the 20% of other work is also recovery-based and things that are not specific, right? And then you get into the off season. To me, that goes back to 50-50, because you're not really training as hard in terms of like actual practice, but in the weight room, the other energetic systems, that's when I think they kind of get layered in. And how does it actually work like for you? Like, setting that up for professional athletes right now, how are you setting that up? And I know it depends on the person, but like general, how do you kind of see that set up?
Yeah, I see it similar to you. I think that obviously when you're in season, you are very specific on not only the game demands, but the position specific demands.
I don't think people understand the demands, respectfully, because like I didn't truly understand how I really work with them, and my eyes didn't really open up until last year, being in the facility with you, like doing all these things behind the scenes, how much and how taxing a game is.
Yeah, it's the game is taxing of itself, but if you look at the overall allostatic load of these athletes, you've got 3 hard practices a week. Now this is your livelihood. So this isn't intramurals, it's not a hobby at this point, right? This is your livelihood. So you have to be physiologically, mentally, emotionally ready for every practice. As a professional athlete, you may have a bad practice, you can't have 2, right? So if we go through the typical week, Sunday's a game day, high outputs. And you know, that's like, people have asked, do you do max effort training in season? Yes, every Sunday. That's a max effort day, right? And so there's no room for max effort lifting in season. Max effort occurs, and so the physiological drain and recovery required from an NFL game is tremendous. And you've had an opportunity to be on a field, high velocity, high accelerations, high decelerations, blunt force trauma, 22 miles per. Players running 22 miles per hour, 250 pounds each, colliding. It's 70 car accidents a game. And so guys come out of that pretty banged up. And we know that neurological fatigue doesn't just stem from high CNS outputs. These guys are getting neurological fatigue from blunt force trauma with not only opponents, but the ground. And so Sunday is it's a demolition. It is. It's high stress. It's high anxiety. It's high CNS outputs. Winning, you always feel better after win. Losing now gives you more of a drain hormonally on the athlete. And so Monday's a day where they'll come in and we'll still have to get some work done. Weight training, some conditioning, engaging the aerobic system, promoting some recovery.
What does that look like? Say a player comes in, perfect game, no problems, but normally taxed, versus a player comes in, they maybe had like 3 big hits. They're feeling pretty taxed. Like, what would the difference be with training? Yeah,
I think the day after the game, again, we have to meet the athlete where they are. And we certainly want to take advantage. If they come in and they've had a pretty clean game and aren't too sore, that athlete's fairly motivated to train and typically has a pretty high output in a good training session.
Nice.
The flip side of that is the athlete who's gotten banged up, who's not only physically drained but mentally drained and sore. And so we have to make a decision as a performance coach. Will this training session that's planned put them in a larger hole physiologically and from a neuromuscular standpoint? Do we modify the session and still get something done today, or do we just push this to tomorrow? today's going to be an aerobic day. We'll get you in the pool. We'll get you a massage. We'll get some body work done, and let's come in tomorrow. The issue with pushing to the next day is that's the day off. So do we want to push it to the day off and not give them a true day off? So those decisions are made on individual basis with coach and player. Yeah. And then Tuesday's a day off, but kind of getting back to the focus and the intensity required for practice, then it's a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday practice. Mm-hmm. High velocities, game-like situations. Stressors aren't as high as a game day, obviously, but there's still stress with performing at a high level because it's your job. And so then Saturday's more of a down day, then we go back to game day Sunday. But so in season, and this isn't 1 week and then time off. It's week after week after week. It's 17 games in 18 weeks. And with that break in there, that bye week may be coming after the 4th game or maybe coming after the 12th game. Yep. If you're lucky, you get it kind of in the midpoint of the season. And so it's not just an acute response that we have to take as coaches to get these guys recover for the next week, but it's a chronic, just the chronicity of weekly high outputs, weekly blunt force trauma, and recovering from that, and it really establishing a routine of body work and of breath work techniques, massage therapists, training, knowing when to push the training, knowing when to pull the training. We can't, if you pull back every week now, we've got an athlete who may be unprepared the latter 4th of the season. If we push too hard, now we may have an athlete that's burned out the latter 4th of the season. Yeah. So it's that push and pull, and I think that's and that's if you go back to kind of our original question about what we learned when we first started, is it's that push and pull, the art and science of it. Yeah. We know we can all learn what the science says, but when the athlete walks in the room, do you know the athlete well enough to know that, you know what, today we got to pull back? Yeah. Or just examining the gait of an athlete, we know something's off. Yeah. The examining, if you know the athlete, you know the facial expression when they walk in if something's off, how fast they're moving, the posture of their upper back, the posture of their pelvis. You can, so if you know your athletes, you can tell these things and intervene. You know, and you spoke really eloquently about kind of the off season and players kind of, if these are the energy system demands in season, we probably should get away from that a little bit in the off season. And I've always used this term, physiological buffer zone, meaning these are the degrees of freedom we have and the planes of movement we move in to play the game. Mm-hmm. My position requires me to be in the frontal plane, the transverse plane, the sagittal plane, at typically these degrees of freedom at these speeds. Well, if in the off season, if we can increase that buffer zone, meaning we can train beyond those ranges of freedom. We can train at higher velocities in those planes of movement. We can train at faster speeds and higher amounts of accelerations and higher. Now we've got this huge zone from which to operate in, that if our position specific demands are here, but we have the opportunity and the capability to operate here, now we can keep an athlete healthier. And so that to me is that off-season program when these guys leave us. And all too often, you may have a player who rests for too long and then goes right back into his position-specific work. Yeah. Well, we haven't created that buffer zone. Yep. And so just that buffer zone of aerobic work and all the things we've been speaking about, I think that's to me in the off-season where these things lie. Yeah. And it's not much different than the weekend warrior, right? Who goes out and does high-intensity work on the weekend. Well, that buffer zone has to be created during the week where we can safely operate in there and without setbacks, strains, sprains, pulls, things like that.
I like that. So let's stick in the NFL, and I'm going to transition to like Gen Pop, CEOs, like everyone, because all of this is so applicable, right? Are you allowed to talk about like a rough protocol? We'll say like for like after, on a Monday, after a game, someone will get no specifics or anything, but like exercise. Like say someone comes in, they had a pretty clean game, right? What does that general setup kind of look like for you, like in the best case scenario? Yeah,
typically, there's a couple schools of thought. I always think movement as soon after the game, the faster we move them, the better they are. Which may be difficult the day after the game because of soreness. But we've all, exercise and blood flow has this analgesic effect. We feel better when we're done. And so now, what does that look like? There is no set template for that.
Yeah.
A player may come in and it may be, look, we're going to do some heavy, high force isometrics, some overcoming isometrics, because why? We know that you have chronic tendinopathy, patellar, quadricep tendinopathy. You're an older athlete. You're banged up from the game. We know that we can, speaking of isometrics specifically, we know that we can program isometrics at very high forces, very high outputs, very high effort, very low muscle damage, and improve strength. And so that may not be programmed for the day, but that may be what we have to go to. So we'll have a program. Monday's typically our day where we'll get more lower body work done than any day of the week. They'll walk out feeling better, but it's also, if you do it Wednesday, you're 48 hours closer to the next game, and you have practice that day.
Yep.
So ideal scenario is that game days on Monday. In college, it was game day Saturday, and we would do this on Sunday. In the NFL, game day Sunday, we do this on Monday. Tuesday's the day off. So what it looks like is Monday you come in an ideal scenario. You get and different times of the year, the emphasis is different. The strength quality we're trying to improve may change. It may be a maximum, and by position it changes, and by individual it changes. Yeah. So these questions are a little bit tough to answer. We may have two different, we look at the wide receiver position as a position that needs primarily speed. Well,
let's do that then, real quick. So no real crazy specifics on the person, but go on position.
Sure.
Just like you said.
So we take the wide receiver position. What are their physical demands dictate high velocity, lower force, as opposed to high force, low velocity? Okay, in general terms. Yep. So in a performance coach's mind, he may think we need to do all explosive work with this wide receiver, or could be a defensive back. Anyone who requires speed. But the athlete's rate limiter to performance, and that's kind of what I speak into. Like, if elite performance is here, let's identify the rate limiters and work on those. Let's not work on your strengths necessarily. Yeah. So the rate limiter for that athlete may be power, or it may be max strength. And these things change as we go through the season. So we can address max strength, and that's no longer a rate limiter. Now rate of force development becomes a rate limiter, and we address that. Yeah. So a wide receiver comes in. So based upon the individual needs, there may be a different physical quality that we are emphasizing that day. Okay, and if all goes as planned, we will emphasize that, we will track that, we will, improve that quality, and then we'll go on to the next rate limiter to performance. In theory, that sounds good, right? And we talked about that. In application, if all 5 of those guys come in banged up, okay, now we're not going to expose them to high power outputs, to fast velocities, because they're having a hard time getting into a parallel bodyweight squat at this point. Yeah. So now we've got to, what do we do? We have to regress that program. Now we have to extend the dynamic warm-up. We may have to do some hands-on therapy with that athlete, just to improve like neuromuscular firing sequences of, let's say, the hip extension pattern. The glutes aren't firing first, and the hamstring is. Okay, now what can we do neuromuscularly to reset that? And we have techniques for that. And that
technique you did to me?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that real quick? Because I never had that technique done to me. Yeah. And it was interesting because I wasn't prepared for the pain.
Yeah. So it's just a system, essentially to test specific movement patterns, some global movement patterns, but more specific movement patterns, such as the hip extension pattern. And we know that the glute is supposed to be the primary driver of hip extension. If the glute's not the primary driver, the hamstring or the low back becomes the primary driver. Both of those are problematic because the hamstring driver promotes an athlete who's more likely to injure the hamstring. A low back driver is an athlete who's got chronic low back tightness and soreness. And so identifying those patterns and resetting those are important for us, right? If we're going to come in and you're going to do a step up or a lunge pattern or even a squat pattern, in hip extension, we want the glutes to primarily drive that movement. And if they're not, other muscles will. I mean, in elite athletes are the ultimate compensators. Yeah. So if I'm one of these elite athletes, if movement program A doesn't work for whatever reason, injury, faulty neuromuscular pattern, I can go to movement pattern B and be just as effective. Me being not a great athlete in college, if motor pattern A was destroyed, I'm done, right? Yeah. But these elite athletes can go to B and sometimes C. Well, eventually it catches up, and because of the compensatory mechanisms, they end up injured. Yeah. But we want to identify those. So guys come in Sunday, and we kind of take inventory, and it's a triage, and it may be a neuromuscular reset. Mm-hmm. And that athlete may be, okay, look, we're going to extend the dynamic warm-up. We're going to keep all your repetitions in the 6 to 8 range, and we're going to use moderate weight today, and we're going to live to fight another day. Yep. That obviously can't be every week because now we have an athlete who's regressing in strength and power. But it may be what we spoke about, just some heavy isometric work, and we feel good about that. We can put them on force plates, and we can track rate of force development and max force outputs isometrically. Yeah. And that's a stimulus. So you're looking at when an athlete comes in, what stimulus can we provide that where they walk out of this room, they feel better, and it gets us closer to where we want to be with that athlete from a strength, power, speed standpoint. And so those are the things that kind of we go to, and the methods are many with how we get there, but ultimately it's communication with the athlete is so important. That athlete has to buy into what the work we're asking him to do. But explain, athletes today want to know why. But that's one of the things I love about coaching, by the way, is that
they should be asking.
They better be asking, right? And as a coach, the flip side of that is I better have a good answer. Yeah. And certainly we're not going to program anything for the simple sake of programming. There's going to be a reason. And as coaches, we need to be able to explain that eloquently to the athletes and clearly.
Yeah, I like that. So if we stay in that train of thought real quick, I think another thing new strength and conditioning coaches might not account for is after a game. There's always sometimes after parties. Sometimes we aren't getting the sleep, but they're still showing up on Monday. Yeah. There could have been things they probably shouldn't have done that night that are done, or just poor sleep, or whatever. They were sympathetic all night, didn't get any sleep. I think accounting for that is kind of a big thing, because I know years ago when I first started doing the work that I did, I was like, oh wow, you're partying after a game. That makes sense. You're a human. I get it. That's what you like to do. But you forget, I have to make a protocol for that. And that's even harder on your end as the coach, where it's like, hey, someone comes in, we're supposed to do this, and you're fine from the game, but you didn't sleep good. Or again, whatever the problem is. And I think that's just something for people to just keep on their mind, just something else to kind of work on protocol-wise in the back of their mind. Say someone was going to do that. Let's say they go out and party, or they just had bad night's sleep, something like that. For you, is it as simple as, hey, still promote some hemodynamic flow, get some movement, stick to the general program, but just pull back on the intensity of it? Is that kind of the route you go, or you go a different method?
Yeah, I think it's like you said, it's hard to quantify what they do when they're outside the building. But we do, look, we're going to promote blood flow.
Yeah, no matter what.
and mobility no matter what, right? Then I think it's just looking, I think you if you know that athlete's done that, you start there. Yeah. And to me, we know what the program or the plan is for this athlete, but you coach the athlete who shows up that day. Mm-hmm. You don't coach the athlete who they were last week. Yep. You coach the athlete who's in front of you right now, and as a coach, you have to have experience enough to know when we can push and when we need to pull. Mm-hmm. And so we take them to the warm-up. Okay, how you feeling? Okay, I'm starting to feel better. Okay, let's try this. Yeah. And if we can work it, most of the time, again, these are not the normal individual. Yeah. They operate on a much higher level and can operate on higher levels in spite of sometimes the physiological state that they're in. Yep. That's not always good to push them to that place. But so with that athlete, we just kind of take it step by step, and if we can get a little more, we will. But we also know, okay, that's about as far as we can go today. Mm-hmm. But there's some conversation involved, and hopefully you have a good enough relationship with your athlete that they'll be honest on what they did. Yeah. I don't see, certainly college, professional, even high school, probably athletes party and do things like that that are deleterious to health and performance after games. I don't see that as it's a problem if they do it. I don't see that as a common occurrence. What I see are athletes who have such a high sympathetic drive following the game.
And they're just up all night anyway.
They don't sleep even when they try to. And it's no fault of their own. They try to. The combination of the enhanced sympathetic drive that just kind of lingers, their inability to pull down into that parasympathetic state, and couple that with, unless you played a perfect game, you're going to ruminate.
Yep. Plays
that I missed.
I was going to ask, have you seen it better with a win or a loss? Because I could see like both being equally as tough.
I think everything's better when you win. Yeah. You're not as sore. You sleep better. But still, when you've won and you're a professional athlete who this is your livelihood and you want to be the best in the world at this and you want to perfect your craft, you've won. But yeah, there's 3 or 4 plays where I know that I didn't do my job. I could have done this. Yeah. And those, sometimes if you do 90% of what's right, we ruminate on the 10% that we did wrong. Yeah. If 100 people praise you and 2 people don't, you ruminate on those 2 people. Yeah. And so athletes are no different. So the combination between just the sympathetic drive from the game. I mean, you just left an arena with 90,000 people, yeah. And now you're home, and it's hard to pull down, right? And you're ruminating over the things that you could have done better, that you need to do better, that you should have done better, that you regret, and so that makes for a tough night of sleep. And so it's not easy for those guys to pull down, get 8 hours of sleep, and wake up refreshed. So I see that as more of a problem, that inability to engage parasympathetic nervous system. I see that as a bigger problem than, athletes partying.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, too, the environment of the arena. So you have all these people there, right? Different vibrational states. Some people happy, some people sad, some people mad. Everyone has cell phones. All the lights, all the technology, you're hyped up already. Like those, voltage gated calcium channels are just going like crazy.
Right.
So like whatever, I think people, like until you step on that field, and not even being a player, but just being on the field. Like when I was there with you, I'm like, oh my, you feel it. It is electric. Yeah. There's so much positive energy and just so much energy is overall coming into your system. So then playing the game, I can't imagine taking a hit, let alone having an injury, So you're just dumping so much dopamine. You're going through acetylcholine and ketone buys, and time of the end of the game, like you're trashed, And I think that environment as overall, I don't think it's worse from like team to team to team. I think as an overall arena, global picture, I think that's something, and we've talked about that. I've talked with other people, teams, things like that, where ideally hoping to fix the arena setting so players feel better. They don't get so sympathetically just drained. Like I hope that's the next wave coming in the new years in the NFL specifically.
Yeah, and it's a great point. It's not just the 3 hours they're in the arena, the 2 hours leading up to it, the anxiety that's building, and not because I'm nervous because I won't do well, just
ready.
The anxiety of, that, like you said, there's 80,000 fans waiting on you. The anxiety of this is a physical game where warriors enter an arena. Yep. And so the anxiety leading up to that. So you're not just talking about the 3 hours from the time the ball's kicked to the final whistle blows, but the 2 hours leading up to that. So, and maybe the night before that.
So you're looking at 24, 36 hours.
You're looking at 24 or 36 hours of some level of anxiety above baseline for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So if we stay with this train of thought, that's week 1. Where do you go when you're halfway through the season, and whether you're doing good or bad, everyone's put in their work. Everyone's trashed. Like from a program perspective, still understanding you have to base it off the person, the athlete coming in that day, who they are, the game they had, all that stuff. I can imagine obviously volume or intensity at some point is just going to have to taper as the season goes on.
Yeah.
How does that how does that affect you with how you're making your decisions?
Yeah, overall? And that's the tough part. You can't volume tapers if you taper intensity, as you know, too soon or too far. Now you've got a weaker athlete who lacks power at the end of the year. And everyone in every sport, in every season, as the season wears on, those championships and those critical games are not at the beginning of the season, they're at the end of the season. And so maintaining strength, power, and speed, mobility, all these things, all these physical qualities are necessary to compete at a high level is of the utmost importance. Now, again, certain positions, your linemen need to maintain strength and power the whole year, or they'll get exposed as the year goes on. Your speed guys, because they are practicing that skill in practicing games and hitting top speed, they'll maintain speed. Now it's just keeping those guys resilient enough, and strengthening becomes we look at oftentimes within our training program, what are they missing that they don't get on the field? Well, on the field, they're getting speed, they're getting accelerations, decelerations, changes of directions. Sometimes, and particularly with guys who have chronic tendinoses, what they're missing is that slow, heavier isometric work that builds tendon strength and decreases inflammation and promotes an analgesic effect. And so sometimes it's the opposite of what you think. In the NBA, it's the players are playing games 3-4 nights a week. They don't need plyometrics and jumping when they come to the weight room.
Yeah.
They need quite the opposite, right?
Same thing in the NHL. They
Same
have
thing
enough games.
Same thing. You're playing your sport enough. Your physical outputs are there. You know, like when you have an injury, if you have a shoulder injury, bench pressing, if you do sprints, your bench press strength will stay largely the same, provided you're training some other muscles. But that's just because the central nervous system, you're still engaging the nervous system.
Yeah.
And so they get the stimulus every week. It's just that what does that athlete need at that particular time to maintain strength, power, and speed, but more importantly, to maintain health. Yeah. And that's not a, you can't longitudinally look through the season and program what we're going to do in week 16. We do use strength residuals. So you're familiar with Isseron's residuals, and we maintain, an athlete will maintain max strength for about 30 days, whether you train that specific quality or not. So as long as you're training, they'll maintain max strength. So once you get to the last 3 or 4 games of the year, you can do some things, and you don't have to push strength quite as hard because we will maintain that.
Yeah.
But certainly, weeks 4 through 12 of the season, that's where you've got to do a really nice job of programming, of listening to the athlete, of never getting too far away from all the physiological needs for the athlete. So you can't ever get too far away. If they're not hitting speed in practice, you got to give them a speed stimulus. Yeah. If they're not hitting hard decelerations and accelerations in practice and games, you've got to provide that. Yeah. So it's just consistent microdosing of all these physiological qualities that you can never get too far away from. But
I love how you use microdosing in that term.
You have to.
It's
right?
perfect. Yeah, it's just funny.
It's not heavy strength stimulus, but if they're not getting on the field, we got to give them a little bit of that. Yep. We can never get too far away from that because it is
great limiting factors, plugging all the holes.
Plugging all the holes on 65 different individuals with 65 different anomalies who are 65 different people. And so it's a done well and done right. I mean, this is, you can spend 16, 18 hours a day as a coach going through every player, making sure that are doing our best to give them exactly what they need. Yeah.
Okay, so we had that. We go through a season, hopefully make it to the playoffs, right? After that, regardless when the season ends, talk about that transition from both a ideal scenario and then kind of the reality of certain scenarios. Because you have two athletes, right? One that stays motivated, one's like, I need a break.
Right. Yeah, it's a good point. And a lot of it depends on the age of the athlete, the experience of the athlete. Ideal scenario for me is, and I truly believe this, no matter how long the season went, how many plays, you may have played 10 plays a game, I may have played 70. And over the course of 17 games, that's a significant amount of plays. I've played more than you. However, I think there's a need for a mental, for lack of a better term, break from the process of training, preparing, playing, training, preparing. I think that's important and different athletes handle it differently. Some people need to get completely away from and go lay on a beach for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Some just need to be home with their wife or their girlfriend or by themselves and just not go to the weight room or not go to the facility. And a week's enough for those people. But I think everyone needs to handle that based upon their experience, their personality largely, and what they see fit. I don't ascribe to the fact that you need a physical break ever. I believe you need a break from intensity, from frequency, but I always believe we're made to move. Right? We're not made to sit in these chairs all day. We're not made to lay on our backs all day. We're made to move. And so day after the last game, move. Maybe you bike, maybe you go out for a walk, maybe you swim, maybe you come and get on the treadmill, but maybe you do some mobility work. But I always think that there's never really a need from physical work. And I think if you take a break from movement, recovery stalls as well.
I think that's where people sometimes see it black and white, right? Because I know that's usually the description, that it's heard wrong.
Right.
Movement, activity.
Right.
That doesn't mean the same thing you've done for 18 weeks.
Correct.
So you're exactly right. That the walks outside, the yogas, the biking, the hiking, things like that.
Yeah.
And I think getting more of these athletes out back into nature, away from the facilities, because they're stuck in there doing this for so long. And I can only imagine the stress comes along with that, because there's so many high demands, making that much money, that high a level. Get out of that, get into nature, get some movement.
Oftentimes we view it as a dichotomy, right? It's like work or rest.
Yeah.
Well, rest can be
right in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, rest can be you get up and you get morning sunlight and you go for, if you're in Hawaii, you go for a walk on the beach, you do a yoga session, you swim a little bit, and you're just active, right? It doesn't have to be sprints on the beach and heavy weight training, nor should it be the day after. I don't believe it. I don't ascribe to that either. I don't ascribe that you just pick up where you left off and go.
Yeah.
But I do ascribe to, we need movement, and for a lot of reasons, right? For mental health, for physical health, the neurotransmitter release. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons that we can go into biochemically why that's so important. But ideal scenario, our athletes move. Mm-hmm. They get away from work,
but
so to speak.
Move.
But move, continue to move, 3-4 days a week. Aerobic work, I love athletes doing aerobic work. But if you're not gonna do aerobic work, just get out and move at least, right? Couple weeks. Then we slowly want you to get back into it. So now, if you got done playing, let's say January 4th, by the end of January, let's start engaging the aerobic system and now this is assuming they don't have off-season surgeries. Yeah. But let's start engaging the aerobic system in a manner that you enjoy, because I think that's another thing too, is that, professional athletes don't always enjoy practice. Yeah. Just like you can have the dream job. Not every day do you wake up fired up enjoying work. Some days are tough, right?
I mean, I do, but.
Yeah, well, I
know you do too.
I absolutely love what I do, but we all have those days, right?
They're tough.
And so find something you enjoy to do. Maybe it's, if you're married, we have players who go on 3-mile jogs with their wife, or they go on bike rides. Great. Yeah. Go hiking and all that stuff's good. I think it's good mentally and physically. So late January, once you get back, engage the aerobic system. Let's start working on some unilateral movement, upper and lower body. Let's correct the asymmetries that inevitably occur from playing what ends up being a 22-week season with training camp. We developed some asymmetries through maybe they may be position-specific asymmetries that help us, but they also just may be compensatory movement patterns we've learned because of injury. Yeah. And so let's correct these asymmetries, let's correct these imbalances, let's engage the aerobic system, and let's do that for a couple weeks. Yeah. Then let's get into some moderate, higher rep weight training, what we typically term as anatomical adaptation. Let's get the tendons prepare for the higher strength work that we know is going to have to come down, right, in the next 4 to 6 weeks. And let's get the neuromuscular system primed. Let's get the soft tissues ready for the high accelerations and decels that are inevitably going to occur when you come back to the off-season program. But let's do it slowly. If you take too much time off, that whole process has to go faster. Yeah. If you want to lose 20 pounds and you start 3 weeks out, that's a problem. Mm-hmm. If you give yourself time, 12, 14 weeks, it's a pretty easy process and much less painless. And so similar with the athletes, if the off-season program begins when they have to come back, let's say April 20th, let's not start that process mid-March. Let's start that mid-February, right, at least. And make that, and just give one thing you can't do is you can't rush physiology. So we need to give the physiological systems of the body time to adapt to whatever stimulus we're providing, and so, so that's the ideal scenario. Now, what other things do we see? We see athletes, some guys will take 4 to 6 weeks off completely. And oftentimes from a good place, they really believe that 6 weeks of nothing helps their body heal. What I found is 6 weeks of nothing, typically, while if you have some acute things, those things have healed, but you don't feel a ton better. Whereas if you move through that process, not only will you heal quicker because you're promoting blood flow, but mentally, physically, you'll feel better. There's always a concern with body composition in the off season, particularly in your larger athletes, that their body composition gets to a point where it requires a ton of work to get them back to where they end of the season. So you still want to maintain as good as you can your nutritional habits of in season. Never stray too far from that. As a professional athlete, you're a professional athlete 12 months of the year. And so you can never stray too far from those philosophies and those fundamentals that have got you where you are, and that are going to, quite frankly, keep you there.
So along the conversation of adaptability, I think that's kind of close to inability to adapt, meaning, and I want to talk about your work with bone to muscle ratio testing, because I think that is, it's in this whole conversation of a factor that is not considered, that can be affected drastically in the off season, in season, just from having too much or too little in the wrong direction. I think that'd be a good one to go down, because again, I know people said that last season in the NFL didn't have more injuries than in previous, like it was pretty average, right? But at least what I saw, I thought it was staggeringly larger than ever. And I saw a lot of non-contact based injuries, just off the field type thing. And I think your research over there is really cool, and no one else is doing that. No one else is doing that testing.
Right.
That's all you.
Yeah, it's the soft tissue injuries are something that we're trying to wrap our heads around. It's been an epidemic. The injury rates are not, and this is across all professional sports, soccer, football, but it doesn't matter.
It's everywhere.
The injury rates are not decreasing. We've learned more than we ever have. The injury rates are not decreasing. So do we need to learn more? Do we need to perhaps pivot and look at some other factors? Because we know these injuries are multifactorial. For everything from sleep to nutritional deficiencies to training history to spikes in training load. So there's a lot of factors involved, but what factors are we not accounting for? And what you're speaking to, the muscle to bone ratio. We do measures. These are anthropometric measures we do on players, anatomical measures. And people may be familiar with a measure like a DEXA. If you go get an DEXA, it's going to give you 3 numbers largely that we care about. It's going to give you some proportionality, left quad to right quad, but 3 general numbers. It's going to give you muscle mass, it's going to give you fat mass, and it's going to give you bone mineral content. And we refer to that as a 3-compartment model. The measures we do are a 5-compartment model. So essentially, and these are the only measures that have been validated against complete dissection of cadavers. The only body composition method that's been validated in that manner. So 2,000 cadavers, we separate the skin, the muscle, the bone, the adipose tissue, and the organs in their constituent parts, grind them up, weigh them. Those 5 compartments now become the sum of the mass of the individual. And that's been validated. So we do these measures. Now, what are we looking for? And again, these measures give us the absolute, not percentages as well, but the absolute mass of your adipose tissue, your fat mass, your muscle mass, your skeletal mass, the skin, and then the 5th compartment is that organ's residual mass. It's important because the 2 largest factors which determine, and to me this is important for athletes, it's also, if I was an 18-year-old, I would have loved to have known this, as someone who's trying to put on muscle mass. The 2 biggest factors in determining how much muscle mass you can hold are the weight of your skeleton and your ethnicity. So African Americans, we believe, can hold about 6 pounds of muscle max for every pound of skeletal weight. So if you've got a 20-pound skeleton, it's approximately 120 pounds of muscle mass on that skeleton, max. Caucasians, we believe about 5.5 pounds of muscle. So that same 20-pound skeleton, now we're talking about 110 pounds of muscle. And those are, again, there's outliers, there's standard deviations. But if you are at that level and you try to go above that level, you can still gain weight. You can gain an indiscriminate amount of weight, provided you're taking enough calories. But the majority of that weight, or all of that weight, is going to be adipose. It's going to be fat mass. So the skeleton, think of your skeleton as kind of the physiological governor to how much muscle you can accrue. Muscles are attached to tendons. Tendons are attached to bones. If that muscle gets too big for that skeleton, then injury occurs. Or there's a performance decrement because the body shuts down what's called the GTO, the Golgi tendon organ, and pulls down that force of the muscle. So that's maximum. Yeah. Within every sport and within positions within every sport, there seems to be this optimal range of muscle to bone ratio, by which if we are below that, we tend to see underperformance. And when we are above it or significantly above, we see what we believe is an increased risk of these non-contact soft tissue injuries you're describing. And so that's kind of the work that we're doing. But we see this can be applied to the 60-year-old with sarcopenia. So we know, so these values don't change in male versus female. And that's specifically on the muscle to bone ratio. There's other proportionality indices, like the shoulder to hip ratio. The shoulder to hip ratio in an athlete, which is essentially the width of your biochromial processes, your shoulders to the hips. That width, that V kind of V taper, that classic bodybuilding V taper, has a ratio. And the larger the ratio, so the larger your shoulders are for the width of your hips, the greater your propensity for being really adept at fast rotation. So rapid rotation of the hips that lends itself to. The smaller that ratio, the more it's a slower, strong, powerful rotation. Yeah. So an Olympic shot putter may be a 1-3. So the closer we are to 1, the more we are rectangular. Yeah. Whereas an Olympic sprinter may be a 1-6 or 1-7. And so we typically see these athletes with the higher shoulder hip ratios being the more elite athlete. You'll see these people being able to rotate better. Like a gymnast is going to have a larger shoulder hip ratio in the Olympics than a swimmer would. The divers have a larger shoulder hip than swimmers because of the demands. So in football, like other sports, you don't reach, it's hard to reach those elite levels without structure. Yeah. Right? Structure dictates function in a lot of ways. And so, but that's some of the work we're doing. And it's really exciting work because I think we go back to what you said about injuries. That's a stone that I don't think, at least in American sport, that we've really investigated enough. So
no, it's not. You're like the only person really doing that work. And you and Chris McClellan, right, were the first two people to do it, correct?
Yeah. In American football, yeah. And now
cool.
Chris is obviously doing the NHL.
Yep.
But it's it's one of these things. It's the anecdotes are too large to ignore. Yep. You can call N of 1, and we've got about 300 N of 1s. Yeah. Right. So.
And to me, after you have 100, you can say 95% of the time, 100% of the time, and that's right. That's a really big number. So for people like that maybe aren't professional athletes or are professional athletes, whoever. Is that a service that's easily accessible? Is that something you and Chris have like a setup for, or what's that look like if someone's interested?
Yeah, so we realized how important this was. And so about 5 years ago, we realized, for me, it was, I want to help people. I want to help athletes. I want to help as many people as I can stay healthy, perform. And performance means something different performance for the 25-year-old NFL player. It means something completely different than the performance for the 52-year-old weekend warrior. Yep. But ultimately, they both want to perform at a high level. And so I called my closest friends in the business, said, hey, look, we're on to something here that I really think you need to look at and get your team measured. And so it began as that, just let's help as many people as we can. Let's get this out there. Let's look at the data. Let's evaluate the data. And let's start building some prototypes of players who are healthy, players who aren't, players who are high performers, players who are underperforming.
Yeah.
Because we did that, we had to form an LLC to have people go measure these teams, to pay these people for their travel.
Yeah.
So we have an LLC called Horizon Performance. And Horizon Performance essentially does that. It kind of ties in these anatomical and physical measures with performance capability, largely, and injury risk. This system has been used for performance identification. Because we know, for instance, in rugby league, you know what elite rugby league looks like. We have much more data in the rugby league. And so and we can accurately predict adult height in 14-year-olds within 97% accuracy. So you can take that 12-year-old or 14-year-old and to a large degree predict based upon even things like the ratio of the humerus to the ulnar radius as to what sport that athlete may be better at or have a greater propensity. Now, there's other factors. The athlete's got to like the sport. He's got to want to practice the sport. But based upon structure, we can tell, look, most of the elite players in this sport have this structure, and you fit more into this mold than that mold. Yeah. And so there's a lot of, from performance identification, talent identification to performance to injury risk mitigation. Yeah. This kind of spans, it kind of cross-pollinates across a lot of different areas.
Yeah. It is funny. Anytime I'm working with a new athlete, especially professional, you're looking for those structures. Usually by the time they're pros, though, they've already done enough to get there, so they already kind of fall into that category. Right. But I've seen it very beneficial in the Olympics, then at the college level. And again, this is why I want to start this podcast, because no one else out there is doing this, right? And you have never done a podcast before. You've been behind the scenes. Like, you've been big in all these industries, but no one has heard about you or even knows about testing bone to muscle ratios or looking at the shoulder to hip ratios. Like, that's kind of like the shoulder to hip thing's been around for a while, but no one's talking about it. Everyone's forgotten about that. And so it's kind of, it's cool to talk about some things that have been there for a while, tested and true, and some new things that are being done that technically aren't new because you guys have been doing it for 5+ years. But that's cool. So I'll get, if there's website links, emails, I'll put all that down in the description box below so people can reach out and all that kind of cool stuff. But if we kind of move from that, so we have rough stuff going on in the NFL offseason, during competition for strength conditioning coaches. We have bone muscle ratio testing, which is applicable for pretty much everyone. Let's kind of take a little step back, right? Let's kind of apply it to everyone. So someone like you who does work, like a lot of work, a lot of different people, all that kind of stuff. General tenets of, we'll start with training, that you tend to fall into if you would have, like, say, someone who's focused on like hypertrophy versus like a 60-year-old who's trying to just move better and feel better, or an athlete in whatever kind of category you want to talk about. So there's 3 different ways to program. So let's say we already did the football one. Let's do a rugby, because you mentioned rugby. Yeah. Like, for like a basic, I don't want to say off-season, but like an improvement phase. Like, what would that look like tenet-wise overall? Because you can't talk about the overall volume and loading, like that gets so specific, but how do you like to view things in those scenarios?
Well, I like to view, again, we talked about rate limiters to performance. Where is the athlete deficient? What are the strengths of the athlete? Where are they deficient? Now, muscle to bone ratio plays into this, right? Does the athlete need, we talked about if they have a high muscle to bone ratio at certain positions in certain sports, the risk of injury increases. So if that athlete presents to me with that already high muscle to bone ratio, should I program a lot of hypertrophy work? Probably not, right? Because I believe, and I've seen enough to know that we are increasing that athlete's risk of injury. So in that scenario, we've got an athlete who, that's scenario 1, right? We have an athlete who has a large amount of muscle mass on the frame. That training is completely different than the younger athlete who just introduced to weight training, who he needs a huge hypertrophic stimulus. He needs to get stronger. He needs to improve power. That athlete who already has a large amount of muscle mass on his frame, we are going to program exercises that do not promote a hypertrophic response, but we still get increases in speed and power. Now, how do we do that? What elicits a hypertrophic response? It is higher rep training, bodybuilding type training, 8 to 12 reps, 10 to 14, somewhere in that range, and heavy emphasis on eccentric contractions that really promote the muscle damage. So how do we eliminate those two? So for that athlete, it may look like if we take a hex bar deadlift, do the concentric portion, then drop it from the top and completely eliminate the eccentric. We can train that really heavy, promote strength gains, promote power gains, and not elicit gains of muscle size. That same athlete can do heavy isometric work. Again, huge CNS component, huge time under tension if you like it to be, no eccentric component, no muscle shortening, no muscle lengthening, huge gains in strength, huge gains in power, huge gains in rate of force development, no gains of muscle size.
Yeah.
So think everything, and look, now, there's also, we can go as far as if we do take that athlete through something that we think may elicit a signal for hypertrophy, there's things that we can do post-workout. So if I'm trying to gain muscle size, what do I want to avoid post-workout? I want the body to handle the inflammatory response, right? I don't want to blunt that response. So what do we do? If we don't want hypertrophy, we blunt that response.
Throw in an ice bath, hit them with curcumin, hit them with dragon's blood.
100%. Ice bath, curcumin, cherry juice, all their antioxidants, immediately post-workout.
Yep.
Works in theory and it works in practice.
It does.
We use this in practice. And so...
and real quick too, you don't get atrophy. Which
Correct.
I think some people are kind of afraid of. Like you just stop that specific adaptation, inflammation with hypertrophy, not adaptation for strength, speed,
Absolutely.
like you said.
Yeah, you still get the positive performance benefits, not the hypertrophy.
Yep.
Flip side of that is the athlete who comes in with to give you context, a linebacker in professional football, his muscle to bone ratio is going to reside in the 5.3 pounds of muscle per pound of skeletal weight range. So if a young linebacker comes, let's use that scenario. I know we were talking about rugby league, same for rugby league, and he's a 4.7. Right now, we know he needs to gain muscle. And so that program is largely going to be geared towards the opposite of what we just spoke about. A little bit higher reps, a little longer time under tension, a little more volume, controlled eccentrics, right? Promote muscle damage. Post-workout's not going to involve ice baths and things that pull down the inflammatory, blunt the inflammatory response. Post-workout's going to include things that feed the muscle, promote protein synthesis, restore glycogen, and that support the training that we subjected them to. And so maybe same position, same sport, completely different paradigms with how you approach that training. Now, I think it's important to have a framework from which to work through as a coach. But then the methods we employ are going to be maybe divergent, even within that framework, depending on the individual.
And the cool thing is that can be applied to every demographic. Like we're talking more sports specific here, but this could be, like you said, the weekend warrior. This could be the bodybuilder in that conversation. They fall towards, I need more muscle tissue. Because we're talking about that, think about all the big injuries in bodybuilding. They've never been in the gym. They're always slipping on ice or falling outside because that muscle bone ratio is just so out of whack.
Right.
It's interesting to look back and kind of have verification on everything you've done and all the information you've presented, because bodybuilders are the biggest example of that. They always have a trouble, like the other guy we talked about the other day with the tricep. That was not in the gym, Or
just the bodybuilder who can hack squat 8 plates aside and bends over to tie his shoes and throws his back up.
Yep.
That goes back to, again, like that physiological buffer zone. If I'm in the gym and I'm actually loaded, so I'm loaded through my spine, and I have no freedom of movement outside of that, the second I move outside or twist and turn or flex my spine, that's a position my body doesn't recognize, hasn't been in, and quite frankly, isn't trained to be in that position. So sometimes, while we have to do certain things for our profession, our sport, oftentimes we aren't inclined to move in ranges of motion and planes of movement outside of that. And I think that's where a lot of us need to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then, okay, along those same lines, get a rough paradigm for training, the nutritional component.
Yeah.
Obviously, like general views, again, depends on the person, but overall, how do you see like nitrogen requirements? How do you see lipids and glucose? Like what's your personal, because everyone has different opinions, different ways to implement, and a lot of them work. So where does Aaron fall in with that?
Yeah, I think it's the goals of the individual. I mean, if we're talking about, it's kind of, if it's the athletic population, we have to fuel performance. I mean, if they don't perform, they don't have a job. If it's the general lifestyle client, they don't have to necessarily fuel performance. They may be fueling for, it could be body composition goals, or it could be to improve health markers. And again, those sometimes are two divergent things, right? Just because I improve my body composition doesn't always mean my blood markers and health markers are in a good spot. And just because my blood markers are in a good spot doesn't mean my body composition is where I want it. And so from the athletic population, we know we have to fuel for performance. Now, in the off season, it's a little bit different. We have an overweight, let's say, offensive lineman in the off season. We can pull down his carbohydrates, lower his calories, because what the performance he's fueling for is strictly that which he's doing in the gym.
Yeah.
In season, that has to change, right? Now he's fueling for that which he performs in the gym, the physical tasks associated with practice, the recovery from competition, and the cognitive drain it takes to be in meetings 4 or 5 hours a day. Yeah. The glucose drain, right? Yeah. And so all those things come into play in season. So one athlete in season versus out of season could be completely different, right? The lifestyle client who's not an athlete, if it's strictly, we always look at health as number one. Oftentimes, if we are lean, fit, we're also healthy, but not always. And so what's the rate limiter in that individual? It's just like an athlete. What's the rate limiter? Well, my cholesterol's out of whack, my triglycerides are high, my blood lipids are in a poor spot. Okay, let's fix that first. And here's the standard, here's the diet you've been on, here's where we need to make changes, now let's retest. If it's simply, hey, my blood panels are in a good spot, I'm 15 pounds overweight, I want to be able to perform better on the weekends in tennis, that's a completely different conversation. Yeah. Right? Now we're fueling that individual for any training they're doing during the week, for if they're a CEO, for board meetings, they've got to perform. Performance to me means in every aspect of life. Right? If I'm a CEO of a company, I want to perform in board meetings. I want to perform in my workouts, my weekend activities, whatever those may be, if I'm competing in something, and if I'm married, a husband and a father at home. And so that, again, the nutrition required for that and the supplementation required for that is completely different than the athlete or than the person who's just got a 9-to-5 job, who's not cognitively engaged all day and just goes to LA Fitness at night. That's a completely different scenario. But generally, I look at everyone that comes to me is a performer. They're coming to me because they want to perform better in some area of life. Yeah. Now, what is that? What are we trying to improve? That's, again, that could be vastly different things. Yeah.
So then what about applicable for all? So obviously situation specific, but what about like a stress management component? So if you have someone, doesn't matter if they're an athlete or the weekend warrior or the elderly or the young, doesn't matter, right? If someone's overly sympathetic, and let's say it's from a stress from work, doesn't matter what the work is, it's still stress from work. What do you like? Do you usually like if it's a breath work, if it's a supplement, if it's a habit, like what do you like usually to go to for someone who's overstressed from like a work scenario?
Yeah, well, number one form of recovery is sleep. Now, if you're overstressed from work, oftentimes you can't sleep. So how do you, so the question is, and the question is that question is asked of our athletes too. Like, to me, recovery is governed by the nervous system. If you cannot engage the parasympathetic nervous system, you can do massage, you can do all these different things, and while it may move the needle somewhat, it won't move the needle as much as if we can get that individual parasympathetic dominant to get out of that fight or flight response, to pull down, to relax at night, and to get a good night's sleep. If we can get, myself included, if we can get it right.
Yeah, we both actually, we didn't sleep at all last night. I was excited for today to hang out, to talk, to do this, and I never had bad sleep. Last night, I don't even know if I went to sleep. I was just sitting there, got to do some stuff at midnight, then I decided to just get up and work after that because we were just excited for today. But and I know your sleep isn't good in general, but you're still a high performer.
Yeah, it's not good in general. And to me, I mean, there's we can, sleep's a whole nother podcast, right? The ability to fall asleep or the ability to stay asleep and what governs those two. But general, to answer your question, I think promoting that parasympathetic response is different with every individual. Yeah. Just like a training program would be different, just like a supplementation program would be different. So what helps me engage my parasympathetic system may not be the same as what helps you engage yours. We have some athletes who, the cold tub, I think the cold tub, in most people, you get a short-term acute sympathetic response in most people, followed by a big dump and a parasympathetic response later at some point. What point that however, the highly fast twitch athletes oftentimes don't ever get to the parasympathetic response. And they stay sympathetic for 24 hours. Yeah. So now those are elite level, but the man or lady who's trying to run a Fortune 500 company, that's elite as well. And so those things may differ. So generally, if we're speaking in general terms, it's breathing. We know breathing controls heart rate. And so if we can have a practice each night, and I think that's important, is the consistency in these behaviors. And if it doesn't work night one, not throwing it away, but knowing over time, that's how we build momentum over time and create change, is our consistent habits. So the breath work at night, I think, is a great place to start. Now there's all kinds of box breathing and 5-5-5 breathing. There's all different kinds, but it's more important to me to find a practice that you can. What's the best workout? What's the best practice? The one you consistently do. Yeah. What's the best diet? The one you'll consistently follow. And so what's the best breath work practice? The one you'll consistently do and have time for in your schedule. Don't plan a 45-minute breath work session in the morning if you know you're like me, where right when the alarm goes off, I'm going to race to get out and get to work as fast as I can. That's not going to work for me. Yeah. But 10 minutes at night will work for me. 5 minutes in the evening will work for me. So I think starting there, where you can find, and to me, that's breath work is the most important. Now, if your chronic consumption of caffeine is high, pulling that down before noon helps a lot of people. But you have to find a way, something that works in your schedule, you can do consistently, to pull down. I don't think it's bad to have thoughts ruminating. I think it's bad to continue to. I think you acknowledge those thoughts and let them go, knowing that's normal. It's when you stay up all night thinking, that's when we run into the problem, right? So having a practice, and like I said, I start with breath work, journaling. Sometimes what helps me is to write things down, to get out of my mind. I keep a notepad beside my bed. That's better. I used to get up and email myself on my phone, but then I'm turning on the blue light, and so defeat the purpose. But I keep a notepad beside my bed, so if I have thoughts, things that I just remembered I need to do, I just write them down. Yeah. And so now there's no reason for me to continue to ruminate on those thoughts. But that's it. I mean, find a breathwork practice that works for you, that you can consistently implement. Okay.
And I think breathwork's finally, right? I think now it's finally starting to trend. Like people are starting to realize, oh, there's a big difference if I do change my breathing.
Right.
I think we see too, just still a lot of mouth breathing. Like if you look at that portion of the lungs, lower circulation of lungs, it's all through that nasal cavity. That pushing, that hemodynamic flow to the whole body starts with lower lung circulation, carbon dioxide tolerance, but that's all through the nose.
Right.
You don't get that through the mouth.
Right.
So then let's say specific scenario, let's say general population person, right? You're working with them or they're watching this or whatever. And let's say they have this problem at night. They can't calm down, but they're obese. More inflammation in the body, they have problems with nasal breathing, and that's what's holding them back. So they're mouth breathing all the time. Like, what would you take them through like a breath hold scenario? Or would you be more like, okay, we'll kind of do the breath work, but we got to get this fat off. We got to pull the inflammation out of those adipocytes.
Yeah.
Like, how would you do a little bit of everything?
Yeah, I'll back up to the mouth and nasal breathing. We know that nasal breathing is a parasympathetic dominant state, promotes parasympathetic nervous system. We also know that mouth breathing is more of a sympathetic, promotes a parasympathetic response, or excuse me, a sympathetic response. Interestingly, when athletes have particularly hamstring issues, I always observe in the cafeteria, so these athletes are oftentimes mouth breathers. Yeah. What's that do? Promotes a sympathetic response, tightens the psoas. When we have a tight psoas, one of the hip flexors, when we have a tight psoas, oftentimes we have also concomitant inhibition of the glute max, which is the main hip extensor. If the glute max is inhibited, what has to work overtime? The hamstring, which is also a hip extensor, but not the primary hip extensor. So now we've got a situation where the mouth breathing has caused a sympathetic response, has tightened the psoas, has shut down to some degree the neural input to the glute max, and now the hamstring has to work overtime. And you don't have a hamstring problem, it's just got forced to do a job it's not supposed to be doing. And just got overworked, and now you got a hamstring problem. Yeah. What you have is a breathing problem, right? To your point. And so I oftentimes, when we see those soft tissue injuries, I go there first. I just watch. I watch the athlete, and if he's a mouth breather, then we address it with him. But I think I love increasing CO2 tolerance. I think that's not important for injury, but that's important for stress tolerance, just for everyone. Athlete or not, you will tolerate stress more if you can increase your CO2 tolerance. For the athlete, I think the simple place to start, and the only reason I do this with athletes is because I've done this with myself. The simple place to start is when you're driving in your car to and from work, keep your mouth closed and just breathe through your nose. To me, it's simple, especially in New York City with New York City traffic. If you can,
you're not going to yell.
If you can nasal breathe, you're in a good spot. So it's relaxing.
Yeah.
You'll notice. I mean, people who are mouth breathers, if they will just breathe through their nose, they will start to pull down and almost feel tired and get a relaxation response. Yep. That helps me. So when you're in your car, nasal breathe. It's kind of an anchor, right? So to and from work, nasal breathe.
You have at least maybe an hour or so, right? In New York, maybe more.
You may have an hour a day. That's a huge win. Yeah. So nasal breathe on your way to work, so you're pulling down on the way to work so you can handle. And when you're going home, equally you're pulling down from the day. Then if we can include that too, before a breathwork practice, or at least nasal breathing, worst case scenario, just as you lay down, as you're falling asleep, nasal breathe. That's where we start. And then if we can anchor the nasal breathing on the ride in, the ride home, before bed, we've got an hour and a half a day we're at least doing it. And now what happens, the athlete starts thinking about it more. Now can we nasal breathe between plays?
Yeah.
Can we nasal breathe in the locker room before the game? Can we nasal breathe between series? We go out there for 8 plays, I'm on the bench for 5 minutes, can I nasal breathe? You know, and pull down, because ultimately we think of sport as this sympathetic hour, 2 hours of competition, and it is. But you have to have the ability. If you look at heart rates in professional athletes, they run a play, heart rate goes up. If the heart rate stays elevated, one of two things typically: they're just out of shape, they need better condition, or they have not learned breathing techniques to pull down. So we've seen we've seen athletes who, if you look at a heart rate trace, you really believe are deconditioned because the heart rate never drops. Teach them to breathe, and they look like the most well-conditioned athlete on the planet. Their heart rate comes down, the heart rate goes up. Their heart rate comes down. If heart rate stays elevated, what happens? We have poor decision making, and it kind of narrows our field of vision.
Yeah.
When our heart rate's elevated, it's that fight or flight response where you lose like 30% of your peripheral vision. You see this cone, you get cone-shaped vision instead of seeing the whole field, and so anchoring the nasal breathing at those 3 spots, to and from work and in bed, and then trying to implement that. Those are small wins right now. Yeah. Next time, every time you sit on the bench between series, nasal breathe.
It's funny. That's literally HRV. Like, to me, heart rate variability, I don't care about the number, because I've seen people where 20 is good, other people 200 is good. Right? So the variability there, I think it's still cool to have a baseline. Like, those metrics are still important. But like, to me, true HRV is literally the ability to get your heart rate up and be able to put down rapidly.
That's right.
Which is in between sets, in between plays, in between presentations, like whatever it is, like that's real HRV to me. And so I've always looked at that data for people, that's like the most important thing to me, number one. Number two, I think this is a good point to point out, and I might be wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I know for me, I didn't learn nasal breathing getting my master's. I didn't learn that in school.
No.
It was only afterwards doing my own education and seeing what was happening in reality. That's what I say. Was that the same with you?
In formal education, we never spoke about nasal breathing.
Yeah. And that's nothing against formal education. I think it's more about that's your basic introduction, and the need to continue learning and then implementing is so important. And I know you're always reading. You're like me. It's always fun to learn.
Yeah.
And to me, you're not going to learn this stuff in traditional schooling.
No.
But I think you need that. I don't think, like, I'm a big fan of college. I don't think everyone has to do it. But I think the majority of people should get a good basic understanding of how to learn, how to find information, and at least a general overview of whatever your field's going to be. But then after that, it's kind of on you. Because once you're in the application process, like you did, you got that first coaching job, it's like, whew, this is different, Do you remember, actually, just because we're talking about nasal breathing, at what point did nasal breathing make a big impact on you? Or was it kind of like randomly it happened and there was no big moment?
Well, it happened over time. I was a mouth breather as a kid, and I had a relative who this relative lived out of state, but every time he visited, he'd say, "Close your mouth, close your mouth, close your mouth," all the time. And I'm quite certain he did not understand the implications of nasal breathing. Now, he was a PhD college professor, not in physiology, in like film.
Okay.
In film and photography, but intuitively he understood that we, as human beings, were supposed to breathe through our nose. And so and it really was, as a kid, it was irritating because every 30 seconds he was telling me to close my mouth. I never knew why. And so that was kind of my introduction to nasal breathing. So at that point I knew, okay, there's something here. He keeps wanting me to breathe through my nose. I have no idea why. I don't feel any different. I had allergies as a child, and so it was almost necessary for me to breathe through my mouth. And then it wasn't, like you said, it's after you get the formal education, to me, that's when you really learn.
Yeah.
No knock on formal education. It's standardized and they teach you what out of textbooks, and oftentimes these textbooks don't cover that. But as we move beyond formal education, you said it yourself that I'm responsible for my development as a coach, as a clinician, as a practitioner. No one else is. So I'm responsible for my development. So that's when you really start digging into a lot of areas, right? Nasal breathing, I think it was James Nestor. He wrote the book Breathe. I think it was James Nestor. His book and several others, Wim Hof and these guys really had me doing deep dives on how important that was. And so, but introduced to me when I was probably 10 years old.
That's funny, because that's not the normal story, which is funny.
Right.
So, okay, with that, have you ever thought, or do you currently offer mentoring to a young SNC coach who may be just out of school, trying to learn and kind of accelerate that process?
Yeah.
Because I know it's tough. As soon as you get that degree, you come out and you get smacked in the face with life.
Yeah.
And it's so new. And again, that application's not there. So the first thing like that I thought after I got my degrees was, I want to learn from someone.
Yeah.
Right. And you can do all you can online, but a lot of good information you should have to pay for, because usually the best people, they're busy, and that's just part of their job.
Right.
Is that something you do now? You want to offer in the future? Like, is that something on your mind?
Yeah, from coaching younger coaches, I can say that I didn't really have anyone who was offering that to me. So a lot of almost all of what I learned, I had to learn on my own, and through making mistakes, right? Unfortunately, I feel like I'm in a place now, I've been in the business for 30 years, that I think all of us that have been in the business that long, part of our responsibility is to help raise the next generation. Now, I don't have 4 hours a day to do that. We have interns in our organization, we have graduate assistants at the college level, and certainly part of our responsibility is to answer questions they have, to teach them, to guide them, and then provided they do a good job, or good practitioners, or high quality individuals, or hard workers, help them get a job, get entry into this profession. I make it a point to, whenever a young coach emails me, within 24 hours I email that coach back, the individual back. If they call me, I call them back within 24 hours. And I always offer opportunity to get on a phone call. And if nothing else, at least give them advice on next steps. A lot of them are like you. They just want to know, how do I get my foot in the door? What are the next steps? I'm an undergraduate. What should I do next? Sometimes it's graduate assistantship. Sometimes it's an internship. But I'll never. Boy, I hope I never get to the point where I don't respond to those. Yeah. And so from a young coach's standpoint, I've always made myself available for those guys. Now, again, I can't take on 20 individuals and provide a daily mentorship through the next 5 years. That would be an online course and mentorship program if I did that, right? But I certainly offer my advice and unsolicited to anyone who's trying to get their foot in the door in the profession.
Okay. And then I assume the same goes for like everything on that consulting side of things. It's kind of like in the, again, description box below, emails, website, whatever, all that kind of fun stuff. If there is the desire to reach out, have a conversation, anything along those lines, you're more than open to it. Things you're doing now, things you want to do in the future.
Yeah.
That kind of sounds like what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think I said earlier that my motivation for getting into this profession I'm in now is to help people. Yeah. Now, I want to be able to expand and help a lot of people. Passion is sports, but my overriding passion and goal is to help as many people as I can. And again, I don't look at performance as strictly professional athletes. I look at performance, I mean, I'm a 51-year-old coach. I want to perform. On the job, I need to perform. I want to do that for a long time. As a husband and as a father, I want to perform. I have physical goals that I want to achieve, that I want to perform. I want to have a great workout. I'm going to go work out in 2 hours. I want to have a great workout and perform there. So my goal is to help as many people. Performance might mean improve my blood markers so that I can live, not only have a long lifespan, but have a long health span, more importantly. And so my goal is to help as many people as I possibly can achieve their goals. And again, that can be, I've had the opportunity to help a lot of people, not only professional athletes, but former athletes with any issues they may be having. Typically, that's orthopedic issues when they're just retired. I've had the opportunity to help a lot of people, 50s and 60-year-old male and female, through some health challenges, achieve body composition goals, compete in their first triathlon, run their first marathon, compete in a bodybuilding competition. So I've been lucky that I've had a lot of people to learn from. I've been doing this long enough, and again, I'm responsible for my development. So inherently, I've spent a lot of time, just like you. If I'm not performing my craft, I'm home reading and trying to perfect my craft. And that craft is, again, it's across all ages, across all genders. That just the health, longevity, performance landscape is something that I'm so passionate about. And I think you and I are very similar, that we want to expand. I want to help everyone in the world, on the planet. We don't have time to, right? I want to do a great job with what I'm doing now, but if I can help more people, that excites me, and that really drives me.
Yeah. And to me, it's not either or. It's always and.
It's always
because I think people that truly want something or are born to do something, you find a way.
Yeah.
Because when you don't think there's more time in a day or you can't be any more efficient, you somehow find a way.
There always is.
There's always
There always is.
You know, I was going to follow up and ask, like, what are the next 10, 20-year plans? But I think we kind of cover that. Yeah. It's just helping everyone. It's learning more. It's getting better. It's helping everyone. It's always progressing.
Yeah, and retirement's never, that term has never enticed me. It's never resonated with me. Me and Lizzie just talked about that yesterday. I never want to retire. I was going to do retire something. From what? From what I love to do? Yeah. Like why? This drive. So I would rather go to a conference or have this conversation and learn than go on vacation. I'm not interested in. Learning fuels me and drives me, and I truly mean that. So retirement's never really resonated with me. If I retire, I can't help people. Yeah. I don't want to retire. I want to continue to help people, and so that's kind of like, that's the mission. So then I'll ask a different question. So your wife, Shelly, who, by the way, is an amazing, amazing human being. What do you think is her 10, 20, 30-year goals personally? And she's going to rewatch this, so we'll see if you get it right. No, Shelly's, like a lot of our wives, some we don't deserve, right? She makes me better. She's tough, hard worker, very disciplined in her own right with how she handles her life, very faithful. She is put on earth to serve, and she knows that. And so she'll serve wherever she can. She serves to the elderly. She serves to children who have no parents in her foster homes. She serves as a substitute teacher. She certainly has served the last, we're so busy. I'm so busy with what I do. I get up at 3:30. I'm at work by 4, and I'm home sometimes at 7 o'clock at night. So she has served our children who are now in college for the last 21 years. And she's truly has a servant's heart. And I'm more type A, driven, focused, want to take over the world. Yeah. And she is more laid back. If it happens, it happens. Have trust, have faith. Yeah. Everything's going to work out. And so she's kind of the yin to my yang. Yeah. And so for me, she's the perfect one for me, for that. But we both share, I will say this, while her drive she's very driven, her drive is different than mine. We both share the importance and hold really dear to the fact that we're both here to help people. Mm-hmm. Her way of helping is completely different. Yeah. She lends a hand, she's a voice. My way of helping is, hey, I want to improve your life. I want to extend your life. I want to get you to be the top performer. I want to help you achieve all your goals. I want to help you dominate your industry. Yeah. I get fueled by people, by seeing the people's success that call upon me to help them. Yeah. Shelly gets fueled more by like being there and improving their day. Yeah. Making them happy, giving them hope, That's cool. Yeah. Okay, so kids following in similar footsteps. Yeah. You want to talk about that? Yeah, so I've got daughter's going to be the first female head coach in the NFL. Yeah, so I've got a son who's 21. He wants to be in the performance realm. Mm-hmm. Very interested in coaching, not team sport, but probably individual. And very interested in he had a conversation with Alex a couple times, and very interested in the longevity space. The health span, the lifespan space. He's very interested in nutrition. So he'll find his way, and I'll help him. Obviously, he's got to own it, but he'll find his way through where he where he finds his niche. My daughter wants to be a head football coach in the NFL, and she's currently a student assistant football coach at Indiana University. Just won a national championship this year, so she's had a nice introduction to it.
Yeah.
But great kids that, yeah, you can thank Shelley for largely raising them, right?
That's cool though.
So, yeah.
It's again, my kids aren't there yet. They're still super young. I can only imagine, because I've always seen it hitting different milestones, but then seeing them kind of follow in your footsteps and wanting to do similar things.
Yeah.
Like that's gotta feel so good, you know? Like whenever that picture you sent me when she won, when they won that picture on the field, I was like, oh, that's so exciting.
Yeah, it does. It's especially for Grace, my daughter. It's you know, she was as a kid in gymnastics, and so it was really my wife takes her to the gym at 3:00 and they go home at 11:00 at night, 6 days a week, and so I didn't see her as much as I like to, and now, being in the performance space in football specifically, that's something for us to share.
It's just the same schedule.
Yeah, same schedule, right?
Yeah.
And so it's something where we can now connect more, almost now that she's in college, and we even connected as a young girl, because I was working. Yeah. Unfortunately, I wasn't home as much. My wife was with her much, so they connected. Now it gives us a chance to connect on similar professions, and so no, it's fun. It's fun.
Yeah, and your family's amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
I spent a lot of time with talking one-on-one with all of them.
Yeah.
And it's just always fun stuff to talk about, great people. And, you know, I keep finding the pattern of successful people are also happy people and passionate people.
Yeah.
Like that's been the trend. That's what I've seen for everyone in your family. So it'd be cool to kind of see how your kids progress, proceed. And I mean, they're in the right field. They know all the right people, and they're already hard workers. They already have the passion. So it just sounds like a matter of time. That'll be cool to follow their journey.
And it's equally as cool meeting your family. You know, I've been here for about 15 hours. I got in last night, but we got a chance to spend time with Lindsay and the kids this morning. So really cool family, and I think you're ahead of me as a father than where I was. So you're
Thank you.
Balancing all you do for people and all you do with your kids. It's really cool to see, and so. Man, we've enjoyed our time here.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's about everything, guys. Again, description box below will have emails, links, like whatever we talked about here. I'll just put a ton of stuff down there. And feel free to obviously reach out. Aaron is an amazing human being, always devotes his time to people, and just, again, as you can tell, very, very knowledgeable. So, dude, thank you so much for coming on.
It was great. Appreciate it.